Welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today because we are about to dive deep into one of the most astonishing and fascinating stories in the world of rare coins. A story that combines the excitement of history, the thrill of treasure hunting, and the sheer amazement of how something so small and seemingly ordinary can hold a value so immense that it changes the way collectors, investors, and enthusiasts see the coins they carry in their pockets. And today's feature is none other than the 1993 D Washington quarter, a coin that on the surface might appear to be just another piece of everyday pocket change minted in Denver in the early 1990s. But in reality, due to a combination of rare mint errors, striking mistakes, unique anomalies, and the sheer unpredictability of minting circumstances has been valued by experts and collectors at a staggering $49 million. A number so high it makes people shake their heads in disbelief. Yet when you start to explore all the reasons, the historical context, and the possible errors that could have created such a valuable specimen, the pieces of the puzzle come together in a fascinating way. So let's walk through it step by step and consider everything that could make a 1993 D quarter rise to the status of one of the most expensive coins in history, beginning with the basics of the Washington quarter design itself, which has been in circulation since 1932, originally created to honor George Washington's 200th birthday and struck with his profile on the obverse, while the reverse at that time carried the bold image of an eagle with wings spread wide. And by 1993 this design was still standard until the state quarter program came years later. So a 1993 quarter is not necessarily rare in and of itself, since billions were struck for circulation. But the Denver Mint, known for its massive production output, sometimes experienced striking issues, misalignments, die deterioration, or planchet contamination, and in rare instances a handful of quarters left the presses with extreme and eye-catching mistakes that collectors are willing to pay life-changing money for, especially when only a single or very few examples exist. And when we imagine a coin like the 1993 D valued at $49 million, we know it cannot be an ordinary mint state coin. Rather, it must involve an error so unique, so dramatic, or so historically significant that it transforms this humble 25-cent piece into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And possibilities include a double die obverse where the inscriptions such as Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date 1993 show dramatic doubling visible to the naked eye, or a double die reverse where the eagle's feathers, arrows, or olive branches appear shadowed and doubled, and these doubling errors, if strong enough, can already make a coin worth tens of thousands. But in extreme and famous cases, collectors push those values into the millions. And another possibility is an off-center strike where the design is only partially struck on the planchet with the rest blank, and if the date is still visible on such an off-center coin, the value skyrockets. Yet alone such an error may not account for $49 million. So we must consider layered errors such as a 1993 D quarter struck on the wrong planchet altogether, perhaps accidentally struck on a dime planchet, a penny planchet, or even a foreign coin blank that had been mixed in at the mint. And when a quarter design is forced onto a smaller or larger planchet, creating a coin with completely unexpected size, weight, and metallic composition, those errors are so desirable that advanced collectors compete furiously to own them. And when we consider how some transitional errors such as 1943 copper pennies or 1944 steel cents have reached values in the millions, the idea that a quarter with a combination of extreme minting errors could be worth $49 million is not far-fetched, particularly if only one known example exists. And beyond striking errors, we must think about die clashes where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, leaving ghost-like impressions of the opposite side visible on the coin's surface, or broad strikes where the coin is struck without a collar, creating a wide and distorted appearance, or multiple strikes where the coin was fed through the press more than once, creating overlapping images, and even edge lettering or planchet lamination errors where parts of the metal peel away, revealing odd textures, And when a coin exhibits several of these features in combination, the rarity compounds exponentially. And then there is the possibility of experimental planchets used by the mint for testing purposes. Sometimes different compositions were tested in secret, and if one of these blanks accidentally entered circulation with a normal design, such as the Washington quarter, the resulting coin becomes one of the rarest anomalies in U.S. numismatic history, and experts have documented how a small number of experimental quarters from various years slipped out, each commanding astounding sums at auction. And so if a 1993 D quarter exists that was struck on such a test planchet, perhaps in silver, gold, or another unexpected alloy, and combined with a double die or off-center strike, then suddenly we have a perfect storm of factors that explain why such a coin could command $49 million at auction. And collectors value provenance too, meaning, if the coin was found in an unusual setting, perhaps directly from a mint employee's collection or discovered in a sealed mint bag decades later, the story adds tremendous value, because people are not only buying the coin itself but also the legend and the exclusivity of owning something absolutely unique. And we must remember that wealthy collectors and investors see such coins not merely as numismatic items, but as alternative assets, much like art or rare gemstones, where the rarity and the story can justify seemingly unbelievable prices. So this $49 million quarter becomes more than currency. It becomes a piece of history, a symbol of chance, and a treasure that connects us to the unpredictable and imperfect process of coin production. And what's also exciting is that stories like this fuel the dreams of everyday people who search their pocket change hoping to find a coin with an error, a rarity, or an anomaly that might change their lives forever. And while most 1993 D quarters are worth only face value, the existence of a single extraordinary specimen shows that miracles in numismatics do happen, and it inspires everyone to look closely, to examine every detail from the mint mark to the strike quality, from the edge to the weight, because hidden among billions there could be one coin that is absolutely priceless, and the sheer length of time since 1993 also adds intrigue, because many of these error coins may have gone unnoticed for decades, circulating quietly in everyday transactions before someone with a keen eye discovered the anomaly, and by then the wear and tear might have reduced the sharpness of details, yet still the error remains visible enough to confirm its uniqueness, and that uniqueness becomes the foundation for extraordinary value. And collectors dream of being the ones to hold such a coin in their hands, to examine the doubling, the misalignment, the off-metal strike, or the unusual surface texture, knowing that they have stumbled upon not just a quarter but a life-changing fortune. And that's the magic of numismatics, where history, rarity, chance, and human passion come together. So next time you have a 1993 D quarter in your hand, take a close look, check the date, the mint mark, the surfaces, the edge, the weight, and who knows, maybe you will be the one to discover another incredible piece worth tens of millions. Because as this legendary $49 million 1993 D quarter proves, even the smallest coin can hold the biggest surprises. Next, 1981 D quarter dollar USA coin today, as we dive into another fascinating story from the world of rare coins, where an everyday piece of pocket change can transform into a multi-million-dollar treasure that stuns collectors and investors alike. And in this episode, we will explore the incredible tale of the 1981 D quarter dollar that has been valued as high as $3 million because of the extraordinary combination of minting errors, striking mistakes, and historical curiosities that have elevated this particular coin far beyond its original 25-cent face value, capturing the imagination of numismatists across the globe and showing just how unpredictable and exciting the world of coin collecting can be. Because while millions of 1,981 quarters were struck at the Denver Mint with the recognizable D mint mark, only a handful carry the strange anomalies, imperfections, and quirks that make them legendary. And when such a coin surfaces in the market, collectors are willing to pay astronomical sums. sometimes even millions, just to add it to their collections. And so we begin by looking at the year 1981 itself, a year that might not immediately stand out in the broader narrative of United States coinage, but one in which subtle changes, minor equipment issues, and overlooked details combined to create some coins that would become some of the most coveted error quarters ever discovered. And the first point of fascination lies in the planchet itself, because in certain cases the wrong planchet was accidentally fed into the presses, meaning that instead of the correct copper nickel-clad composition quarter planchets being used, sometimes planchets meant for nickels, dimes, or even foreign coins slipped into the hoppers, resulting in off-metal strikes where the diameter, weight, and even coloration differed noticeably from the expected look of a quarter. And collectors prize these wrong planchet errors because they are so obvious to the naked eye and so undeniably a result of mint mishandling. And if you add in a clear Denver D mint mark on such a wrong planchet strike, the rarity skyrockets, making it plausible that a specimen combining multiple errors could reach multi-million-dollar valuations at auction. And then we must also consider double strikes, a category of error that occurs when the coin fails to eject from the press after the first strike and receives a second impression that overlaps, shifts, or even rotates relative to the first, creating ghostly, layered images of Washington's bust or the reverse eagle motif, which can sometimes appear dramatically misaligned, giving the coin an almost surreal appearance. And when a 1981 D quarter exhibits such a dramatic double strike, collectors recognize that they are looking at something so rare and visually compelling that it becomes a once-in-a-lifetime find. And furthermore, certain examples are known to have broad strikes where the collar fails, and the design spreads out beyond the intended rim, giving the coin an enlarged, distorted shape, while others might show clipped planchets where a crescent-shaped chunk of metal is missing from the coin blank before it was struck, both of which add to the sense of uniqueness and desirability. And now imagine a coin that combines more than one of these issues, perhaps a wrong planchet broad strike with a double die obverse, or a double-struck quarter on a foreign planchet. And suddenly we are dealing with a piece so improbable, so spectacular, that it ceases to be just an error and becomes a true numismatic marvel. And when you factor in that collectors thrive on one-of-a-kind anomalies, it becomes easier to understand how a coin with a face value of 25 cents can command a hammer price of $3 million. And speaking of double dies, we should remember that the early 1980s was a period when the mint's die preparation techniques were still susceptible to misalignments during the hubbing process, leading to doubled lettering, date digits, or even the motto "In God We Trust" showing a clear secondary image. And these doubled dies are among the most famous and sought-after errors in numismatics because they are identifiable even to amateurs and can be authenticated without much dispute. And so a 1981 D quarter with strong doubling on the date or the motto, especially in high-grade condition, is something that could elevate the coin's profile dramatically, particularly if it exists in very limited numbers. And since no two errors are ever exactly alike, the notion of a one-off spectacular piece is perfectly plausible, which explains the astronomical figure associated with this Denver minted quarter. And we cannot overlook the role of condition in this equation, because collectors and investors are always willing to pay a premium for coins that survive in superb mint state grades, with sharp details, luster surfaces, and minimal contact marks. And so when a rare error 1981 D quarter also happens to be preserved in gem uncirculated condition, certified by a top grading service with perhaps an MS67 or MS68 designation, the rarity is multiplied exponentially, leading auction bidders to push the final price into the millions and beyond physical attributes. The historical context also adds intrigue because by 1981, the U.S. Mint was heavily engaged in producing massive quantities of coinage to meet national demand, and quality control was often strained under the pressure of volume, meaning that errors were more likely to slip through unnoticed, and Denver itself had a reputation for producing quirky and collectible pieces in certain years, which makes the 1981 quarter part of a larger narrative of mint mishaps that collectors track with enthusiasm. And another angle comes from transitional errors, where a coin intended for 1 year or design ends up struck with the wrong design, die, or composition, such as coins that bridge design changes or composition switches. And although 1981 was not a transitional year like 1965 or 1971, strange situations sometimes occurred where leftover planchets or dies from different programs were mistakenly used, which can result in enigmatic pieces that defy straightforward categorization, further boosting their desirability. And beyond the technicalities of minting errors, there is the psychological factor of ownership, because for many collectors the idea of possessing a coin that is essentially one of one, unmatched by any other example in the world, is irresistible, and it is this sense of exclusivity that drives prices into the stratosphere. For while bullion coins derive value from their metal content, error coins like this derive value from uniqueness, narrative, and collector demand. And once the story of such a coin spreads, whether through auction catalogs, numismatic journals, or even viral online discussions, its fame compounds its monetary value, creating a self-reinforcing cycle where rarity and notoriety feed into each other. And in the case of the 1981 quarter valued at $3 million, it is precisely this combination of striking errors, condition, and fame that has propelled it into legendary status. And to further understand this phenomenon, we can compare it to other rare quarters like the 1932D or 1932S Washington quarters in high grade, or the 1970S quarter struck on a 1941 Canadian coin, all of which have achieved huge sums at auction. And yet the 1981D stands apart because it comes from a modern era, making the survival of such an error all the more astonishing. And collectors are fascinated by the idea that even relatively recent circulation coins can hide treasures, reminding us to always check our change carefully and consider the thrill of the hunt. Because for many collectors the idea that you could stumble upon a fortune in your pocket change keeps them engaged and passionate. And the 1981 quarter's $3 million valuation has become a beacon of possibility, inspiring countless treasure hunters to search. And while some may question how such a coin could truly be worth so much, the answer lies not in face value or metal content but in rarity, provenance, condition, and collector demand, which together create a perfect storm of value. And ultimately, this story underscores the beauty of numismatics, a hobby where history, art, chance, and human desire converge in small metallic discs that can tell larger-than-life stories. And as we marvel at the 1981 quarter and its multi-million-dollar journey, we are reminded that hidden in everyday objects are extraordinary opportunities. And perhaps the next time you receive change at the store, you might just be holding a piece of history worth more than you could ever imagine. Next, 1984 quarter dollar US coin. Today, as we dive into the fascinating world of rare coins and hidden treasures, where ordinary-looking change can sometimes hold extraordinary stories and life-changing value. And in this episode, we are focusing on one very special piece, the 1984 quarter dollar, that has stunned collectors and investors alike with its unbelievable auction price tag of $3 million. A number that seems almost impossible when you consider that this coin was once just part of everyday pocket change. Yet, because of its unique set of errors, mistakes, and fascinating minting anomalies, it has become one of the most valuable quarters in history. So let us take a deep journey into how and why this coin is so remarkable, and why collectors are willing to pay such staggering sums for it. And as we do that, we will explore all the little details that might make a coin like this stand out, the errors that define its rarity, the historical context of the Philadelphia Mint in 1984, and the endless possibilities that make such pieces worth their weight in millions. Because when we speak about error coins, it is not simply about one accidental strike, but about a wide range of potential mistakes, each with its own story and significance. And the 1984p quarter is a perfect showcase of how these accidents of production can elevate a humble 25-cent coin into an object of global fascination. And we begin by looking at the striking process itself, because quarters in 1984 were produced by the millions at the Philadelphia Mint, each planchet being fed into high-pressure presses where the obverse featuring George Washington and the reverse with the proud eagle were supposed to be struck cleanly and consistently. Yet the reality of coin production is that machinery can misalign, planchets can be defective, dies can crack, and errors can occur at multiple stages. And in the case of the 1984p quarter, these errors appear to have come together in a near-perfect storm, creating a combination so rare that no other coin of the same year and mint is known to match it exactly, and collectors speculate that this particular coin might exhibit a dramatic off-center strike where the design is shifted so that parts of Washington's portrait or the eagle on the reverse are cut off by the rim, and when such an error is sharp and bold without excessive, where it creates huge demand. But that alone might not explain the $3 million figure, which leads many to believe that the coin also shows a double die, one of the most famous and sought-after error types, where parts of the lettering like Liberty, in God We Trust, or the date 1984 appear doubled as if shadowed, and these doubling effects can vary from subtle to dramatic, with the strongest examples commanding astronomical prices. And if a 1984p quarter were to exhibit both a major off-center strike and a bold double die, it would already be a once-in-a-lifetime rarity, but collectors suggest that it could also show die cracks, perhaps jagged lines running across Washington's profile or splitting the eagle's wings, giving the coin a distinctive look that marks it forever as unique. And still others argue that the coin may have been struck on the wrong planchet, such as a copper penny or even a foreign coin blank, which would dramatically alter its weight, color, and metallic composition, making it even rarer. Because wrong planchet errors are some of the most exciting discoveries in numismatics, blending the familiar with the bizarre, and in some cases a coin struck on the wrong planchet can be one of only a handful known, adding to the mythology of the piece. And beyond the technical errors, we must also consider the condition, because for any coin to fetch millions it must not only be rare, but also remarkably well preserved. And this 1984p quarter is believed to exist in near mint state condition with sharp luster, crisp details, and minimal handling, which adds another layer to its desirability, as collectors are not just buying an error, but a pristine survivor. And then comes the story factor, because every valuable coin has a narrative that captures the imagination. And for the 1984p quarter, the story is that it survived unnoticed for decades in circulation or in a collection, until one day it surfaced and stunned the numismatic community with its unbelievable combination of traits. And these stories fuel demand, as buyers do not just want the coin, they want the legend. The tale of how a 25-cent piece could transform into a multi-million-dollar artifact. And we must understand that value in numismatics is not determined solely by metal content or face value, but by rarity, demand, and historical intrigue, all of which come together here. And as we explore the possibilities of the 1984p quarter, we should imagine scenarios like a partial collar strike where the rim is distorted, or a broad strike that spreads the design unnaturally wide, or a clipped planchet where a bite-shaped chunk is missing from the edge, each of these errors adding more spice to the coin's identity. And when multiple errors combine in one coin, it creates what collectors call a multiple error coin, an incredibly scarce phenomenon that magnifies value exponentially. And then there is always the allure of human error, the possibility that a mint worker accidentally set up the dies incorrectly, or a test strike intended for destruction accidentally escaped into circulation, making it essentially a forbidden piece, which adds mystique and allure, because when something is not supposed to exist it becomes infinitely more desirable, and that is precisely what makes this 1984p quarter worth $3 million, not just the errors, but the story of improbability and impossibility, the dream that a small coin can hold a big fortune. And when you think about it, that dream is what drives so many people into the world of coin collecting, the thrill of the hunt, the idea that somewhere in your pocket or in an old jar in your house there could be a coin just like this waiting to be discovered. And that possibility is why videos like this are so exciting, because they remind us all that value is hidden in the most unexpected places. And as we keep talking about this incredible coin, let's imagine what collectors see when they hold it. The sharp shine of the Philadelphia Mint Mark P under magnification, the way the doubled letters leap out, the unusual strike pattern that makes it instantly recognizable, and the whispers of its auction history, where bidders from around the world competed in a frenzy, pushing the price higher and higher until it finally reached that unbelievable $3 million hammer price, setting records and cementing the 1984 P quarter as one of the most valuable coins ever. And beyond that price, there is the emotional value, the bragging rights, the pride of owning something truly unique, because in the world of rare coins, ownership is as much about prestige as it is about investment, and this particular coin represents the pinnacle of both, a financial prize and a historical jewel, and that is why we can spend hours talking about its features, imagining the microscopic details that separate it from ordinary quarters, picturing how a small die shift here or a misaligned strike there could create a masterpiece of rarity, and thinking about how many other 1984 P quarters may have been struck correctly and spent without a second thought, making this lone survivor all the more remarkable. And so as we wrap our minds around the idea of a $3 million quarter, we should remember that numismatics is not just about money but about the stories coins tell, the history they carry, and the endless possibilities of discovery. And in that sense, the 1984 P quarter dollar is not just a coin. It is a treasure map, pointing us toward the hidden riches that might still be out there waiting to be found. So keep looking at your change, keep checking those dates and mint marks, because you never know when the next miracle coin will appear, and maybe, just maybe, you could be the one to uncover the next $3 million treasure. Next, 1986 D quarter dollar USA coin, the most exciting deep dive into the fascinating world of coins, treasures, and hidden gems that could be sitting right in your pocket change. And today we are about to uncover one of the most mind-blowing stories of modern coinage, the tale of the 1986 D Washington quarter dollar. A coin minted in Denver that for most people would seem like nothing more than an ordinary 25-cent piece, but under extraordinary circumstances, and with the right errors and mistakes, this coin has the potential to be worth a staggering $5 million. And in this video, we are going to explore exactly why such a coin can command such an astronomical value, what kinds of minting errors and striking mistakes make it so desirable, how collectors and investors drive up the price at auctions, and why the 1986 D quarter has captured the imagination of numismatists all around the world. So let's begin by putting this coin in context, because the Washington quarter series had been running since 1932 to celebrate the bicentennial of George Washington's birth, and by 1986 the mint had already gone through decades of producing these quarters in copper-nickel clad rather than silver, and the Denver Mint was striking hundreds of millions of pieces for circulation. So at first glance, the idea that one of these ordinary quarters could be worth millions seems completely impossible. Yet history has shown us again and again that error coins, rare varieties, and unique anomalies can elevate the humblest of coins into numismatic legends. And this is precisely the case with the 1986 D quarter, because what makes this coin so valuable are not the regular examples that circulated in the millions, but the extremely rare ones that slip through with dramatic mistakes that collectors go wild for. And to understand why, we need to take a closer look at the different types of errors that could occur during the minting process and how each one could affect the value of the coin. So first, let's talk about double die errors, which are among the most famous and valuable mistakes in U.S. coinage history, caused when the design on the die is impressed more than once, but in slightly different positions, creating a doubling effect on inscriptions like, "In God We Trust, Liberty." The date, 1986, or even the mint mark, D, and strong double dies are considered treasures by collectors because they are visually striking and extremely rare. So if a 1986 D quarter with a dramatic double die were discovered in high mint state condition, it could easily reach millions at auction. Then we have off-center strikes, another dramatic error type where the coin blank or planchet was not properly aligned between the dies during striking, resulting in part of the design missing and a blank crescent showing, and the more off-center the strike, while still keeping the date and mint mark visible, the higher the value climbs, because collectors love these coins that visibly show the minting process gone wrong. Then, there are broad strikes and partial collar strikes where the coin expands beyond its normal boundaries or has a distorted rim, creating unusual shapes that stand out instantly. And another extremely rare but possible mistake is a wrong planchet error, where a quarter was struck on a blank intended for another denomination such as a nickel, a dime, a cent, or even a foreign coin planchet. And these kinds of wrong planchet errors are some of the most prized of all, with known examples from other years fetching 6 and 7 figure sums. Then we have multiple strike errors where the coin is struck more than once, leading to overlapping or rotated designs that make the coin look almost surreal, and collectors will pay a fortune for dramatic multiple strike examples, especially if they are in pristine condition. Another fascinating error possibility is die cracks, chips, or cuds where the striking die begins to break down and leaves raised lines, blobs, or missing sections on the coin. And while small die cracks are relatively common, dramatic ones that cover significant portions of the coin or create odd shapes are highly collectible. Then, there are lamination errors where the clad layers of the quarter peel or crack due to improper bonding or impurities in the metal, leaving dramatic streaks or missing surfaces. And these are especially valuable when they create large, eye-catching designs. Then we have struck-through errors where some foreign material like grease, cloth, wire, or even another coin fragment gets between the die and the planchet, leaving an impression that can be unique and highly prized. And the 1986 D quarter could potentially feature such a striking error, making it one of a kind. But beyond the technical details of each type of error, what truly drives the value of the 1986 D quarter into the $5 million range is the combination of rarity, condition, and demand, because not every error coin is valuable. Only those that are both rare and desirable to collectors rise to the top. And if a dramatic error example of the 1986 D quarter exists in mint state condition with blazing luster and minimal marks, certified by top grading services like PCGS or NGC as MS67 or MS68, then the bidding wars at major auction houses could be fierce, driving the price into record territory. And history supports this, because coins like the 1943 copper cent, the 1944 steel cent, the 1955 double die cent, and the 1970s proof quarter struck on a Canadian planchet have all sold for staggering amounts due to their rarity and error status. And the 1986 D quarter could easily join this elite group of legendary rarities, especially when you consider how few collectors pay attention to modern clad quarters compared to silver issues, meaning that dramatic errors could have slipped by unnoticed for decades, hiding in collections, bank rolls, or even circulation, waiting to be discovered. And this is what makes the story so thrilling, because the idea that a $5 million treasure could be sitting in someone's change jar is what keeps collectors hunting, inspecting, and studying every coin they come across. And beyond the errors themselves, the role of publicity, provenance, and collector psychology cannot be underestimated. Because once a rare coin is discovered and sold for a record amount, it makes headlines, attracts worldwide attention, and cements its status as a must-have rarity, creating a feedback loop where demand skyrockets and values climb even higher. So if a 1986 D quarter with a dramatic error were to surface and achieve a multi-million-dollar price at auction, its fame would ensure that future sales could go even higher. And this is why the $5 million figure is not just fantasy, but a real possibility in the world of numismatics. And when we think about it further, the 1986 D quarter sits at an interesting point in U.S. history as well, being part of the Reagan-era economy and only a few years before the launch of the state quarters program that revolutionized collecting. So in hindsight, it represents a transition period in American coinage, adding another layer of significance for collectors. And as we wrap our minds around the idea of this quarter being worth $5 million, we must remember that value in numismatics is not only about rarity, but also about the story. And the 1986 D quarter has the perfect ingredients: an ordinary coin turned extraordinary by mistakes, a hidden treasure waiting to be found, and the dream of discovery that fuels every collector's passion. So the next time you come across a 1986 D quarter, take a moment to really look at it. Check for doubling, off-center strikes, odd surfaces, missing layers, or anything unusual, because you never know if you might be holding the next record-breaking coin, the one that collectors will fight over, the one that will sell for $5 million. And this is why the story of the 1986 D quarter is so captivating, because it proves that numismatics is not just about metal and mint marks, but about history, error, rarity, and the thrill of the hunt. And in that tiny 25-cent piece lies the possibility of life-changing wealth, the excitement of discovery, and the reminder that sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest value. And that is the incredible truth of the 1986 D quarter, a coin worth big money because of its errors and mistakes, a coin that transforms from common to legendary, a coin that symbolizes the magic of collecting and the dream that drives us all to keep searching for hidden treasures. Next, 1978 $quarter USA coin today on this incredible journey into the fascinating world of rare coins, where ordinary pieces of pocket change can sometimes transform into mind-blowing treasures worth unimaginable sums of money. And today we are going to talk about a coin that takes this idea to an entirely new level, because we are diving deep into the mystery and legend of the 1978 $quarter, a coin that in extremely rare error forms has been valued at an astonishing $650 million. Yes, you heard that right. A simple 25-cent piece that most people would casually hand over at a vending machine or drop into a coin jar, in certain extremely rare conditions, has achieved the kind of valuation that rivals works of art, iconic jewelry, and even entire mansions. And the question is, how could this be possible? How could a quarter from 1978 ever be worth more than $500 million? And the answer lies in the magic of minting errors, human mistakes, and historical circumstances that converge to create once-in-a-lifetime rarities. So in this ultra-detailed script, we are going to unpack every single aspect of the 1978 quarter, the minting process, the types of errors that could make it so valuable, the psychology of collectors who would pay such astronomical sums, the history of the era that produced it, and the possibilities that exist in the world of numismatics that allow such a phenomenon to exist. So let us begin by remembering that the quarter in 1978 was part of the Washington Quarter series that had been introduced back in 1932 to honor the bicentennial of George Washington's birth, and by the late 1970s, it had been circulating for decades, made from the copper-nickel-clad composition that had replaced silver coinage in 1965. So under ordinary circumstances, a 1978 quarter is one of the most common pieces of American currency, struck in the hundreds of millions at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. And in circulated condition, most are worth face value, yet within this sea of ordinary production, mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes are so dramatic, so rare, and so historically significant that they become legends. Now, when we talk about a coin being worth $650 million, we are talking about an extreme outlier, something so unique that it stands as a singular artifact in all of numismatics. And to imagine how a 1978 quarter could reach such heights, we have to consider all the extraordinary types of mint errors that could theoretically occur, because error coins are the beating heart of coin collecting, the anomalies that transform something ordinary into something priceless. So let's go through them one by one in immense detail. First, we have wrong planchet errors, one of the most dramatic categories, where a coin is struck on a blank intended for another denomination. Imagine a 1978 quarter struck on a planchet meant for a dollar coin, or perhaps even a leftover silver planchet mistakenly fed into the presses, and suddenly you have a coin that is not only out of the ordinary, but a true miracle of survival. And if such a coin also had characteristics that made it transitional between eras, its value could climb astronomically. Then we consider double die errors, where the design elements appear doubled because the die received multiple impressions misaligned with each other, and these doubling effects, especially when strong and visible to the naked eye, can catapult values into the millions. Because collectors crave dramatic examples of minting anomalies, then we must consider off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned with the coin blank, leaving part of the design missing and a blank crescent visible. The more dramatic the off-center strike while still showing the date, the more valuable the coin. Now imagine a 1978 quarter struck off-center in a way that creates an artistic, almost abstract design, and you have a coin that stands apart from all others. Another possibility is a broad strike or misaligned die strike, where the collar that normally keeps the coin uniform fails or the dies are not aligned, creating stretched or distorted designs that once again highlight the fascinating flaws in minting technology. And then, there are even more exotic errors such as double strikes, where the coin is struck more than once creating overlapping images, or even triple strikes, which are incredibly rare, and these multiply the uniqueness factor. Next, we move into the realm of planchet errors such as clipped planchets, where part of the coin blank is missing, creating a curved or straight clip in the coin's edge, or lamination errors where impurities in the metal cause the surface of the coin to peel or flake, all of which create visually striking anomalies that collectors prize. But beyond these common categories of mint errors, there are also extraordinary possibilities that could make a 1978 quarter truly one of a kind and worth a record-shattering $650 million. Imagine, for instance, a 1978 quarter mistakenly struck in solid gold because of a mix-up at the mint, or a quarter that was struck on an experimental alloy being tested for future coinage, or even a mule error, which is when the obverse and reverse dies of two completely different coins are accidentally paired together, producing a coin that should never exist, such as a 1978 quarter struck with a half-dollar reverse or even a foreign coin reverse. And if such a coin were authenticated, it would immediately become one of the greatest numismatic discoveries in history, capable of attracting global attention and record-breaking auction prices. Now let us also consider the historical context of 1978, a time of economic challenges, inflation, and changes in minting technology. And within this backdrop, it is not inconceivable that experimental strikes or unusual errors could occur, and if one such error were discovered decades later in pristine condition, encapsulated by a top grading service, and verified as unique, its fame would spread rapidly throughout the coin collecting world. And with fame comes demand, and with demand comes astronomical prices, because at the highest levels of collecting, money is almost no object. The wealthiest collectors and investors compete for ownership of unique pieces that they see as both status symbols and investments, and so a unique 1978 quarter with a jaw-dropping error could ignite a bidding war unlike any other, pushing its value into hundreds of millions. And here is where psychology comes in, because the value of such a coin is not just in the metal or even in the rarity of the error, it is in the story. The narrative of how a tiny mistake in 1978 at the U.S. Mint produced a coin that became one of the most valuable artifacts on Earth. And stories have power. Stories inspire collectors to reach deeper into their pockets. Stories turn coins into legends, and legends command prices that defy reason. Now picture the auction stage. The world's top collectors, investors, and museums all vying for ownership of this one-of-a-kind 1978 quarter, the bidding climbing higher and higher, fueled by passion, prestige, and the knowledge that whoever wins will own something truly irreplaceable. And eventually the hammer falls at $650 million, setting a record not just for a coin, but for any collectible in history. And that is how a 1978 quarter could achieve such a valuation, because rarity plus error plus story plus demand equals astronomical value. And yet, what makes this story even more compelling is the possibility that such a coin might still be out there undiscovered, sitting in a drawer, resting in a jar of change, or hiding in a collection passed down through generations, waiting for the right set of eyes to recognize its significance. And that is the magic of coin collecting, the thrill of the hunt, the hope that among the ordinary lies the extraordinary, that within the common hides the priceless. And so the 1978 quarter serves as a perfect example of how numismatics transforms metal into mythology, because when you strip away the numbers and the values, what you are left with is a reminder that perfection is not always what we crave. Sometimes it is the mistakes, the imperfections, the anomalies that give life its greatest treasures, and the 1978 quarter, with its potential for errors and mistakes, embodies that perfectly, showing us that even a coin designed to be ordinary can become one of the most valuable objects in human history. And so the next time you hold a quarter from 1978, take a closer look, study the date, the design, the edges, the weight. Last 1984p quarter dollar USA coin. Thank you so much for joining us today on this exciting journey into the world of rare and valuable coins, where even the smallest piece of change that looks ordinary at first glance can sometimes be worth a fortune. And today, we are going to uncover the fascinating story of the 1984D quarter dollar that has been valued at an unbelievable $2 million, not because of its regular mintage, but because of the extraordinary errors and mistakes that slipped past the watchful eyes of the U.S. Mint and created rare varieties that collectors are willing to pay staggering amounts of money for. And the magic of this coin lies in the fact that while millions of 1984 quarters were struck in Denver, most of them being circulated heavily and still common today, only a tiny fraction were minted with errors and preserved in exceptional condition. And these are the coins that have shocked the numismatic world, with values reaching into the millions. So as we dig deep into the details, you will discover why this single quarter can command such wealth, and why every collector dreams of finding one hiding in their change jars, coin rolls, or old inherited collections, because the thrill of discovery is what makes coin collecting so captivating. And when it comes to the 1984D quarter, the story is full of fascinating possibilities, beginning first with one of the most desirable errors of all time, the double die error, which happens during the die creation process when the design is impressed twice with slight misalignment, and this causes doubling on the features of the coin, such as the inscriptions Liberty, Indiana, God We Trust, the date 1984, or even George Washington's profile with his hair details and eye features showing dramatic doubling. And collectors prize these coins because the error is part of the die itself, meaning every coin struck from that die will share the same unusual doubling. And in high grade, this kind of double die can turn a coin into a rarity worth hundreds of thousands, and in extraordinary cases millions. And what makes the 1984D quarter so alluring is the fact that some specimens show this doubling strongly enough to be seen without magnification, which makes them incredibly rare and visually stunning to collectors. And then we turn to the repunched mint mark, or RPM error, another hallmark of the 1980s coinage, because at that time mint marks were still manually punched into the dies, and misalignments or multiple punches were common. So you might find a D mint mark from Denver that was punched more than once, leaving a shadow of the letter or creating a doubled or even tripled appearance. And while many RPMs are minor, there are some 1984D quarters with bold repunching that make them very desirable, especially when found in uncirculated condition. And this adds another layer of uniqueness to the coin story. And then, of course, we must consider striking errors that occurred when the coin was actually being struck between the dies, and here is where things get dramatic, because the most visually striking errors include off-center strikes where the planchet is not perfectly centered and the design is shifted, leaving part of the coin blank, and depending on the degree of misalignment, these coins can range from slightly collectible to extraordinarily valuable, with coins that are 50% off-center while still showing the full date and mint mark being among the most coveted. And another striking error is the broad strike, where the collar that normally holds the coin in place during striking malfunctions or is missing, causing the coin to spread out larger and flatter than normal. And when these errors occur on a 1984D quarter, they make the coin instantly recognizable as something unusual and highly collectible. And still another striking error possibility is the double strike or multiple strike, where the coin is struck more than once either in or out of the collar, producing overlapping images of Washington's head or the eagle on the reverse. And these kinds of coins are breathtaking to see and command incredible premiums because they are so rare and dramatic. And then we cannot ignore planchet errors, which happens even before the coin is struck when the blank itself is flawed or mismade. And these include wrong planchet errors, where a 1984D quarter might have been accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a nickel, dime, cent, or even a foreign coin. And when this happens, the resulting coin is immediately a rarity because it weighs differently, looks different, and is a mistake that should never have left the mint, yet sometimes did. And collectors are fascinated by these wrong planchet errors because they are so unusual and testifies to the complexities and imperfections of the minting process. And in some cases you may even find a 1984D quarter with a missing clad layer exposing the pure copper core underneath on either the obverse or reverse, and this creates a two-tone effect that is strikingly unusual and highly collectible and adds significant value. And clipped planchets are another example where a blank was cut improperly, leaving a crescent-shaped missing piece on the edge, and these two add uniqueness and collector demand. And then there are die errors such as die cracks, die breaks, and cuts, which happen when the minting dies themselves deteriorate or break during use, causing raised lines or blobs of metal on the coin. And some 1984D quarters show heavy die cracks across Washington's face or through the eagle's wings on the reverse, and dramatic cuts where large sections of the design are missing, replaced by blank raised areas, are highly collectible because they are essentially one-of-a-kind accidents. And when you combine such die errors with pristine mint state condition, the value of the coin climbs sharply. And that brings us to the critical factor of condition, because the vast majority of 1984D quarters circulated for decades and today show heavy wear, scratches, and loss of luster, but the tiny handful that were preserved in mint rolls or discovered in original bankwrap bags with no signs of circulation can grade extremely high, with third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC assigning grades of MS66, MS67, or even higher. And these top-graded coins are rare on their own, but when paired with dramatic mint errors, they become legendary rarities capable of bringing $2 million at auction, because collectors and investors know that owning one is like owning a once-in-a-lifetime piece of history. And speaking of auctions, it is important to remember that the value of a coin is ultimately determined by what someone is willing to pay. And for a 1984D quarter with a major error in gem condition, the bidding wars can get intense as wealthy collectors compete for ownership and push prices into the stratosphere. And this is how the $2 million valuation becomes reality, because when supply is virtually non-existent and demand is high, the sky is the limit for price. And what makes this even more thrilling is that coins like this could still be out there undiscovered, waiting in old collections or even in circulation, because not every error was caught or documented, and new discoveries are always possible. So anyone who takes the time to look closely at their coins could stumble upon a life-changing treasure. And the very idea that an ordinary-looking 1984 quarter could be worth more than luxury cars or a mansion fuels the imagination and keeps collectors excited and searching. And this is the magic of coin collecting, where history, art, and chance all come together in small pieces of metal that tell big stories. And in the case of the 1984 D quarter, that story is one of imperfection, rarity, and the incredible potential of human mistakes to create extraordinary value. And so this coin has become legendary among error collectors, representing both the beauty of minting and the fascination of errors, reminding us that perfection is not always the most valuable thing. Sometimes it is the flaws, the missteps, the unexpected accidents that turn something ordinary into something priceless. And the $2 million 1984 D quarter is proof of that. And as more people become interested in numismatics and the search for hidden treasures, the allure of coins like this will only grow, inspiring new generations to check their change, search through old jars, and study coins more carefully, because who knows, the next multi-million-dollar coin could be sitting unnoticed in your hand right now. And that possibility is what keeps the hunt alive and makes stories like the 1984 D quarter dollar worth telling again and again with all the awe and excitement they deserve.